time now, and I'm just wondering if you were there. If you're there, open your camera. And let's start talking about the next liberating structure that we are going to experience now. And after that, I'm going to introduce our guests. So what we are going to do, we are going to do the user experience fishbowl, and I'm going to share my screen for a while. And so this is how we do in person. So we have a circle in the center, and they are the fish, and we have Keith there in this picture. And we have all the people around just listening to the fish, and they are discussing. Usually we have a topic, a question, and they start like talking about that question. And how we are going to, how it's going to work in virtual. So we are going to spotlight the fish and as like this little circle, and try to not use the chat. So use paper instead for your notes. And we're going to have 15 minutes for the first question that I'm going to give to our fish. After that, you're going to break out to craft some questions for them. And in the way back, they are going to answer some of those questions. And here we are with Keith, Alyson, and Jakob. So Keith is the co-developer of the Liberating Structures, and Jakob, the co-founder and CEO at Butter, so a video conference platform, and Alyson, alumni here in this course, and LS, a Liberating Structure practitioner, and also a consultant. So we are very, very happy to have you here. Thank you for coming. And I just want you to introduce you very briefly, and then you just jump into this question that I'm going to put in the chat. Just a second. So what is the good, the bad, the ugly, and the lovely of virtual facilitation? And what is yours? Thank you.
Lovely. That's a new addition. I like that.
Oh my, a hard place to start. I think the ugliest, the hardest is, you have a huge group. I don't know, a huge group for me is 300-400 people. And you're trying to use chat to talk to each other. And people in the organization are pretty worried about their safety if they write anything in chat. And I get that that's just a starting place, and there's an opportunity in that, but that for me is hard when there's no safety. And the leaders are still asking, well, why isn't anybody speaking up? And I'm like, oh, well, So.
Yeah. One of the ways that I've been working to overcome that is we've been using an integration of Slido so that people have an anonymity in their everything that they do. And that has its upsides and its downsides, right? So that's good. Some people are more likely to speak up and like say something, but the downside is that you also know people aren't taking ownership for their thoughts, and so you can't, like, if you wanted to pick up on a thread that somebody put in something, you have nowhere to turn to that, and especially if it's a large group.
I think you're hitting the hammer on the nail there, Keith, right? I think one of the difficult things with virtual facilitation is that you're interspaced with the screens, right? That's you're not like you're seeing everyone's faces on the screen. Like here, I can see there's actually a great tradition for having your videos on, but I think in many virtual facilitated sessions, you'll have half the people with videos off. one of the big limitations, and I mean, of course, now I'm talking from a tool perspective with us building Butter, and one of the thoughts behind it was that the ways of interacting, a lot of people took a carbon copy of how they interacted in real life, and then just said, hey, yeah, we're going to be doing that now in video, right? So yeah, that's how it is. The way, or one of the core tenets of building Butter was that we should allow people to interact in a lot of different ways that are, we say, digital first, right? Among other things, like with reactions, even with sound in chat, but in more interactive chat ways. And lastly, just to kind of comment on Alyson's point there, because I think like an anonymous version of Slido is a great way of doing things. We also built in anonymous polls, like open-ended polls that you can run and throughout the session to make sure that you also capture that sentiment. Although I will agree as well that it does kind of leave behind some ownership. So you only want to do it for some questions, but not for others, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, the ugliest part is if you have a small group like this size or even a little bit bigger, you can come up with a lot of interactive stuff. You can do breakouts and so on. But when you get into the, plus 50, 100, 200, it becomes so much harder because, the platforms are not necessarily stable. And so you're trying to put people in breakout rooms and then they don't end up there, they pop back out, or you've got, people who just don't show up in their breakout room or they show up in the breakout room and they don't speak because they are not used to talking and they're not comfortable being on their camera or whatever. So it depends on the audience, but definitely the larger the size, I find the harder it is for it to be as interactive, and that's a real struggle.
Well, immediately I will go to beauty or lovely for a minute, just because it was literally 60 days from the time that it was clear the pandemic was gonna make it hard to be face-to-face. 60 days, the global Liberating Structures community had started innovating and had a set of practices that were working in 60 days. So that gave me confidence. I mean, the people who were initially attracted to it are a little bit early adopters or beyond early adopters, they just jump into things before they know what it is. But even me, I learned a whole nother way to do the work. But what I find, okay, I'm going back to the darker, less lovely. Everybody can do it, right? Everybody can do it, but most people still have not had a compelling, attractive, purposeful set of and productive set of virtual exchanges with people they're working with. It's completely new to them. And so whatever we've been doing, whatever Butter's been doing, whatever I've been doing, Alyson, what you're doing in your big health organization, it's not enough. We're just scratching the surface.
But I think that's a beautiful thing, Keith, that we're just scratching the surface because things have only just begun. I mean, two big points to what you're saying, because I think the first thing is that facilitation is going to be the skill of the 21st century. I mean, it is with remote, it is suddenly incredibly more important, or it's at least way more obvious how important it is in the modern way of working. You cannot host or have a larger team session, or even definitely not a 50 to 100 person session, without actively facilitating it and without knowing how to facilitate. So whether you're a team manager, a project manager, a change manager, you need to know how to facilitate, and you need to know how to do that remotely. And I think that's pretty amazing that core skill of what was actually best practice throughout the past hundreds of years of human existence is suddenly surfaced as an incredibly important business skill. I think second point was our team in Butter is we're 20 people across 11 different countries. And I feel it's so amazing, like this whole connecting with people from different cultures and different countries, like this, right? I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark. Right? It's evening time here, and I guess you guys are from across the world, right? And I think that's freaking amazing. I think how it's like making the world a better, flatter places. It's wonderful.
Yeah, frankly, it's increased the inclusivity like phenomenal amount, because people can join, you know, as long as they can get the connection, like they can join from wherever they are, wherever they sit. They don't have to think about, you know, so many of the things, the cost to be in a space, to be in a face-to-face space. And I feel like the other beauty of virtual facilitation in that regard is sometimes I think people feel some freedom of speaking up in ways on a virtual platform that they don't necessarily feel when they're face to face. Like it does some leveling of hierarchy to some extent, in my experience, you know, because it just has a different feel to it. And I think it does allow people in this way to show up that isn't the case always when you're face to face even.
I think globally, I really felt it strongly here in the United States, that the social justice became more important and inclusivity just became a big deal. So when I talk about the purpose of liberating structures, it's to unleash and include every voice in shaping what happens next. And then from that are a set of principles that specify, you know, more about what you say if you believe in that purpose. What do you say about how you work together? And then finally, it's the practice. What do you do every day? And so those are more, there's a currency in the current moment. Including every voice is a bigger deal. Some relationship between what you say you do and what you do maybe is more important. And there's tools, you know, there's things that you can do to do what you say at scale. Like, can we include every voice? Can we have, I mean, I've consultants, so I sell that to big companies. I've got one right now. It's got, I don't know, 100,000 people across the planet, and they're starting at a simple place, you know, they're starting in a place that I'd like them to be well past, but they're starting.
Yeah.
I think that, no, go ahead. Yes.
Well, I was going to say also, I think with the pandemic, what I noticed was that when people came over to these different kinds of platforms at first, at least in my industry in healthcare, they just started doing, they didn't even kind of know what to do. And so there was this like moment of opportunity, if you will, to say, hey, okay, like let's transition on from face-to-face to virtual. But now we have this moment opportunity to do virtual in a way that has never been done before. I think that's where liberating structures and all the creative things that have come in. And that's been, you know, people were pivoting so quickly and so adaptively that it gave us the chance to do that too in this virtual space that also allowed us to bring in that, you know, new ways of doing virtual. It's not as if people had never been on, you know, a phone call or something before, but now they're able to do things in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that speaks directly into one of the incredible strengths. I guess that's more like a good instead of a lovely part of digital, and that is the ability to codify or document. And in essence, if you have a greatly facilitated session online, a lot of the things that are done in there will be documented afterwards and should translate into outcomes. I say should because in theory, a lot of these things would have happened or should have happened in physical sessions as well. But there's a certain thing about the format in virtual that forces you to, that pushes you towards best practice in terms of say documenting outcomes, documented decisions from virtual sessions, and therefore leads to better outcomes towards the end.
And when Carolina shows up, that usually means we're
Yeah.
over. We're done.
Yes, we can pause.
That's a wrap. Yeah.
Yeah, and 15 minutes just fly
Yep.
by. Yeah. But it's amazing now to, I'm going to put in the chat, so to see what people want to know. So you participants are going to breakout rooms in triads and just craft some questions for the fish. And in your way back, you're going to put in the chat. And so you have 5 minutes for that. Fernando?
Apparate now.
Yeah.
Woo. Or whoosh.
Yeah, one thing that we
Oh.
let me get into the spotlight as well. Bam. Boop, boop, boop. One thing that we do in the fishbowl, especially when we have special facilitators like you, is to not facilitate the questions from the participants to you. So we tell them that the questions on the chat are like baits. So make the baits delicious, because they will choose one or two to chew on. So you'll be able to see the questions in the chat and you pick the ones that you want to answer. Don't bother about answering them all. It's impossible. And if you want to make comments about the answer of the other person, it's also nice. So you'll be self-facilitating. Just try to stay on one question for too long, because we just have like 14, 15 minutes. And one favor to the record is to read the question out loud. So before you answer, you read, because when people rewatch this session, they can understand, because they don't have access to the chat at the same time. So.
And also it's interesting to know that this is the first session of 5. So the questions, it's very good to have them. So even though you don't answer, we have more time with this group to go through the questions.
Nice.
So that's the unpolite version of fishbowl from ourselves. You know, when a person keeps the question in their hands and they sort the questions or group and give you, actually will put you to work more than you should.
What did I sign up for, Fernando? You know?
That is his magic.
Yeah, politeness, but
I
with
love it.
kindness.
Or controlled chaos, half controlled chaos.
Control chaos. I like that.
Speaking of chaos, Jacob, my favorite school in the world is the Chaos Pilots, and over in Aarhus. Yeah.
Yeah. I know them quite well. I didn't know that you knew of them.
Yeah, I've gone out there a couple times and done some work with classes, which there's nothing like working with the Chaos Pilots class. If you ever get the chance, go for it.
It's such a cool name as well, right?
So the Chaos
Chaos
Pilot. I
Pilot.
mean,
Never heard
I'd
of
like to have that in my credentials, but
Yeah. That's very true.
Maybe I do know what you're talking about, and I just wasn't pronouncing it correctly.
it's a school. It's a small
Yeah.
little special state-supported school. Although people from all over the world come, there are a lot of Danes in it, and inspired faculty. They're just no nonsense, inspired by complexity science ideas, and the founders are all. It's just dreamy, you know. For me, it's a dreamy place.
I put the link in the chat, Alyson, if you want to.
Yeah, it's really
You
cool.
knew them as well, Fernando. Yeah, Chaos Pilot. Yeah, it's a it's quite well. I think it's reasonably well known in Denmark, but it's almost, I'd say, it's more well known internationally, and in facilitator circles, it's also reasonably well known, I'd say, internationally, especially in Europe. But I guess it also traveled to the States. So.
Yeah, we use the concept of the arts of learning from Simon in the session 3. So we help the participants to get that model, that archetype, to design the sessions. So we instill a little bit of Chaos Pilot in the virtual as well.
I love it.
I can't
And
wait to
the-
look at butter more.
Yeah.
I just clicked on the link, but I want to explore. I want to get the free trial. Check it out.
That's the idea. We are here to just uncap the wires and get some sparkling going.
Mhm.
That makes me very, very happy, Alyson.
Jacob, have to tell you, I'm like on promising platform number 4 or 5 that's trying to do what you're doing. So I'm willing to try again, maybe.
I tell you what I see. I see a lot of interesting platforms, but what I don't see in my industry is the security measures that would allow a company like mine to be able to use it. So like, I prefer the look of Mentimeter over Slido, but I can't use Mentimeter in our client facing meetings because it doesn't have that. It hasn't passed like the security measure.
And I tell you why, Alyson, it's like always one of the last things that you go to, right? It's when you're building something, building in security measures that are enterprise level, it requires a tremendous amount of resources that just takes a ton of time. So you need to almost have built like the base from small and medium-sized businesses first, like the revenue base there, before you have the ballast to go up to enterprise level. Unless you focus the enterprise first, but that requires tremendous amount of investment up front. So yeah.
Okay, people are back.
Whoa.
Yeah, welcome back, and please write in the chat your questions. And our fish is going to see the questions as bites, so they're going to bite the ones that they feel that they want. And so just to remind that we are in the first session of 5, so we kept the questions and we can go over some questions after. So please write in the chat your questions. They're here. It's true. And I like to think about how the questions can move us and maybe answers just stop us. Awesome, some questions are coming and the floor is yours.
I'll jump on the bait because my name is mentioned. That makes it easy to jump on a bait. So again, Jen, you're asking, Jakob, you mentioned outcomes more likely to be accomplished with a well-facilitated meeting, how to keep people accountable for those actions. I don't think that's necessarily a specifically virtual session or virtual facilitation skill, but I think it's an incredibly important skill for ensuring that decisions made in virtual sessions are anchored and actually have impact on the organization. How you make people accountable, like the first step is ensuring that all actions are clearly taken down and that you have clear responsibles allocated to the actions. I think there's a framework called the RASI framework or something like that. That's quite helpful in sort of like responsible, accountable, and then 2 other elements, quite helpful for that. But that's only the first step. The other step is then ensuring that you set up clear follow-ups and that you know that as a facilitator, your job does not stop when the session is over. Your job, it depends a little bit on the context, of course, but optimally your job should only stop when the actual impact of the session is achieved or when you see some effects of your session in the organization. So that's at least how I'm thinking about that.
What he said. That's good. Okay, there's many things to bite on. Alyson, what are you going to bite on?
Well, I was intrigued by Kenneth's one. How do you sell it? How do you deal with change? How do you get evidence of the quality of intervention? And I'm a behavioral scientist, and one of the things that I try to convey when we're doing this is, if we're all in the same space together, whether it's face-to-face or it's online, we need to be doing something to interact with each other. Otherwise, there's no, you could just record whatever you have to say and send it out to people. You need to be working with the content that you're dealing with in some way. And this is in terms of the interactivity part. So if you are going to be together and you're going to be in a room, you need to interact with each other. Otherwise, you could solve whatever you're trying to solve through email, through, a video recording that you want to make sure everybody hears the same message. There's other ways to do it. So that's a sell for the interactivity piece. And people tune out after like 12 minutes or something. It might even be less than that if you're just talking at them. So that, I don't know if that quite got it, the question that you have.
I want to jump on that a bit, and I'm going to go off the rails just slightly. Then point number one is you get what you measure. So selling it is in the moment. What you're partly is addressing just what Alyson said. Work on the content, work on the thing that's important for the group to work on. And I particularly like to do frequent measurements, and 3 things come to mind. Like, are you more connected? And these are done visually in Zoom. You annotate on top of a chart, and the chart is a measurement-oriented chart. And the first one is, are you more connected to people? Is the context for taking action becoming more clear? And did something new pop into a possibility, an option, a novel idea? Did it pop into the conversation? And if you're keeping track of that, those are the things you value. Those are the things that I think make a difference. And most of the time, because it's a developmental act to get people good at this, yes, you're getting things that might become a good or better or best practice. I don't really care about that, but I do care about those other things. So measure them as you go, right? So you're selling it as you're doing it. You cannot, it sounds like nonsense if you say, well, we're going to do this thing called 1, 2, 4 all, where you think for yourself, which is rare in and of itself, for you to have a chance to think for a minute about an important, difficult challenge. Then you have 2 minutes to talk to a pair. Oh, well, what does that do? You're sifting and sorting through a bunch of ideas. Then you're in a group of 4. What are the ideas? And, do we want to say anything about what we talked about to the whole group? Well, you've just sifted and sorted through a whole bunch of stuff. And that group of 4 could be in a group of 400. So then you have 400 people or 100 people posting something that's important about that challenge. And you've just sifted in 12 minutes. You've sifted and sorted through. You've already proven that there's momentum, there's critical thinking, and there's probably new ideas in there. So you don't have to prove a thing in advance. You prove it as you do the work. So sorry, I went off the rails for a second, but that's my answer to that question. And you can't say that in advance. No one believes it. You just have to do that. So if you take this course from Fernando and Carolina, you will be able to do that. Like, ding.
I love the 1 to 4, Keith. It's one of the it's a model that's it's super simple and extremely helpful.
Let's say the first 1, 2, 4 all doesn't come, the heavens don't open as a result. Do another one. It took you 12 minutes. And at the end of the first 1, 2, 4 all, I said, well, is that all we got? Can we go deeper or reach higher? Should we do one more?
Thank you for going off the rails.
Welcome. Yeah, more than you wanted, I'm sure. Okay.
No, it was to the point. And again, I mean, I was representing some other folks, and they can chime in too. I'm not trying to hog this. I just think I appreciate your demonstration of it because it gave me some ideas to work with.
Sweet. Good. Thank you.
Someone asked about priming. I try to prime people a little bit in some of my meetings when I send out the meeting invitation. If I know that they have been used to a particular type of meeting, I will say, come to this meeting, be prepared to turn your camera on, have a pen and paper handy, and be prepared for this probably not to be like any traditional virtual meeting that you've been in lately. Another thing that I love is to set the intention at the start. So give them a reason of why this meeting is going to be good. Like, my intention is that you're going to come out of this meeting having learned X, Y, and Z, or saved time in the long run with this challenge or whatever, you know, that's my intention, so that they feel like they're joining the meeting for a purpose that they're going to gain from. Otherwise, they may not show up. So that's just a couple of things that related to the priming question that I've done.
I was about to talk to exactly the same the priming question, because I think it's such an important one, Alyson, and I really love what you said. One of the core tenets that we're working with is this whole idea about energy in the session. Like, it's one of the most important things. If you visualize energy as like this like graph that you need to keep as high as potentially as possible. You've got so many different touch points throughout the session where you can bump that energy up. Again, yeah, I hate to be referencing Butter all the time, but one of the first things that we built in Butter was a waiting room with music and like some images and stuff that kind of primes that energy from the very beginning, that this is not an experience like all other experience that you've had before. And it kind of ensures that when people pop into the meeting the first time, the energy levels are already reasonably high. So you don't have to work on getting them up from a 0 to a 1 in terms of energy levels. And again, back to the whole interactivity thing that we just spoke about before, I think that's the second part of kind of managing that energy throughout the session. I think that's simply the most important part about priming, and priming is simply part of this larger concept of energy management throughout the session.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like you, always try to encourage people to use the emojis, all the tools at hand during the meeting. That's part of the energy. GIFs, we use Microsoft Teams a lot in my company, and so there's GIFs, there's emojis, and certainly with our smaller group, I think we've developed that culture now over doing it, starting with it, getting it going and starting with it. But there were a lot of questions about the camera, and I have to say this is one of the challenges, because a lot of people in my group, when we in our smaller meetings, not like our sponsor or client facing meetings, they still don't want to use the camera. And we've had conversations about this. Is it okay? Like, do you force people? Do you don't? I don't think you can force people to turn on the camera. People need to feel safe. We try to model it by doing it as much as possible. Or some days you just don't want to be on that camera because you don't look as good and you don't feel as good. So we just say, hey guys, I'm off camera today, but I'll be back on next time if it's a recurring type of meeting. I try to always be on camera unless I'm the only one on camera. And then I usually call out the fact that I'm going to turn on my camera. Like, well, if nobody else is going to be on camera, I'm going to go off because I don't want to just look at myself. But and then I find that sometimes people will go and they'll turn theirs on. Oh, I don't want you to be by yourself on camera. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and I always wish people were on camera because I can read their body language, their expressions so much better. And that's one of the tricky parts, is when that doesn't happen. And I also think it gives people more license to multitask when they go off camera, and so which is a bummer.
Just one quick add on there. I've included people in design groups who help with the initiative or the work, whatever the work's being done. Somebody is given a role of a synthesizer and storyteller. So particularly in strategy work, we're answering specific questions and a story comes out. And so it's not just data points or thing, it's literally a story gets told. And you make that part of that this work you're doing online is coherent enough that a story about where we are now and how we're moving into the future takes shape. And it's possible because the digital record, like you're drawing on the digital record. I really want to bite on, who asked it? All the people over time that have been excluded for historically been left out. This is Angela.
Crystal.
Okay, who maybe more than one person said that, but disability, illness, how do we do that? And so early on, when I first started using Liberating Structures, somebody came up to me and said, and it's when I got excited about the work, you know, it was before there was a name. And they said, you know, that was lovely. I'm so happy. I've never been included in a conversation about what's important at this company. And then a couple more, and they weren't the people that I really was noticing, or that they just were excluded almost all of the time for different reasons. And so in this environment, there's a lot of things built into Zoom that you can learn how to use. Language things, Fernando and Carolina have opened my eyes to many of them, you know, that are just delightful. So I don't know, maybe you're going to do a little piece on that. How do you handle people who may not hear everything or see everything, or you know, don't want to be barraged with information quickly, you know, going slow, going fast. There's a whole bunch of things you can learn to do, some of which I practice, I try. Yeah, so
amazing to listen to you all. So just to finish here, so if you have a piece of advice for this group, what would it be?
Say that again. I didn't catch that, Carolina.
If you have a piece of advice for this group of people who are interested in virtual facilitation, they're learning more about virtual facilitation or practicing more, or refining their own practices, what would be this piece of advice? And I think Keith is using.
I might have one. Dare to be yourself very much when you're on camera, and when you're facilitating virtually. The more you give of yourself, the more other people will give of themselves, and the more comfortable they will feel. That's at least been my personal experience. And then check out Butter, because that'll also help a lot. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
They will.
Yeah, I think, did we lose Keith? I think what I would say is try to bring a little bit of levity. And, you know, when we're in person, we do something called whispering out loud, where we like talk to our co-facilitator about what we're thinking or so on. I think doing that in the virtual space is also helpful. So bringing a little bit of levity, like when the cat comes in and jumps in my lap, you know, it lets people remember that we're all human and we all have lives. And I try to show my real background, because it's not bad, but it's real. And so it just sort of lets people see each other. It helps magnify humanity, I think. And that's something when you're virtual is really important. And I think just a lesson that we bring out of the pandemic as well is, you know, magnifying humanity and letting people see each other as we really are.
Yeah, thank you, Alyson and Jakob and Keith, who just not here with us anymore. But yeah, let's
Help from the unicycle.
Yeah. And it happens, you know. And imagine if it's just Keith as a celebrity interview or something. So we have to have plan Bs sometimes. Yeah, so thank you, Alyson. Thank you, Jakob. And we have our break change with you.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to be going on our 10-minute. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy your
Awesome.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jacob.
Bye-bye.